Aloha and welcome to Thumbing Through Yesterday, the podcast where we take our favorite books off the shelf, blow the dust from them, and remind ourselves why it is we love them so. My name's Tom Galley, and with me today we've got Tony Pasculi.
Happy to be here.
And we are doing one of my favorites today. This is a graphic novel, a slight deviation from the plan, but this is The Watchmen, written by Alan Moore, drawn by Dave Gibbons.
Amazing.
It
Amazing.
is.
So this is your pick. I noticed you say pull the dust off, but this looks like a brand new copy that you have here.
It is, in fact, a brand new copy. I think I loaned my other copy, which was actually the first copy I ever got. I got it as a birthday present from my friend Rob back somewhere between 85 and 90. But I think I loaned that to a friend a few years ago and have lost contact more or less with that person.
Always a danger.
It is. But I've got several of her works as well. So
okay.
I think I might have come out ahead on the trade, truth be told.
So you first read this in like 1985, 1990?
Somewhere in that window, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
It was in my early college days before I moved down the road.
I think ditto, around that 85, 86, 87, somewhere in there. After, I did not encounter this until it came out bound as a book.
Same.
Yeah, I did not read individual issues.
Like I said, this was a birthday gift to me. In a way, I kind of wish I had individual issues instead, because simply manipulating this monster tome and, a lot of the artwork, it goes right out to the edges of the pages. And, you've got to push the binding alarmingly to peer into the corner to get some of the lines of dialogue.
This Watchmen is interesting for me because, as a kid, I loved comic books, and then I just stopped reading them. And then after I graduated from college and I was working at Microsoft, and a friend of mine he's like, I'm getting rid of all my comic books. Here, just take whatever you want. And I just grabbed a random bunch of stuff. It's like, why not? Free shit. And Watchmen was in the pile. And I read this. It's like, holy shit, this is good. Yes. And I started reading comics again after that because of Watchmen.
I've never been much of a comic reader. I had a handful of comics lying around my house, and every once in a while I'd buy one. But they were all, and I had friends that are really invested in comics, and it's really annoying when you've got friends with people that are into the depths of it and you're not. I think other people who have casually brushed against Tolkien feel that way when they're around me.
Yeah.
So it's that sort of thing. So I just, or whatever, I never really dove into comics. So, they would complain about whatever was going on with the X-Men or complain about, something happening in the DC franchise or whatever. But this was nice because it was a turnkey, start to finish story. And I loved it.
It's a book that you can just read and then put down. And then you don't have to oh my God, the crossover event. And am I going to miss part of the...
Yep.
Yeah, it's just starting to happen with the MCU now. It's like, oh God.
Yeah, I've lost interest. After Endgame, I kind of have become a passive fan at best.
So what Watchmen did for me is it was kind of like a turning point in terms of, because I burned out on superheroes. And this was, even though it's a superhero book, it's a deconstruction of superheroes. Mm-hmm. And it really is an elevation of the genre to an incredible extent. And I just realized that there are a whole bunch of writers out there who are writing comics at a very, very high level. Not just Alan Moore, but who else do I want to say? Brian Michael Bendis. Read some of his early indie stuff before he got on to Marvel. The Power series is good. Alias series is good. What's his name? Garth Ennis, who does The Boys, but also was doing Hellblazer at that time. DC came out with a whole line of Vertigo comics. They were like for adults. Sandman was part of that.
Okay.
Yeah, Sandman, incredible. And it's much more than one volume, but it's a full story from beginning to end. You can read it, and then you've got it, and you're done with it. Yeah. I
do approve of that. Now, of all of those that you mentioned, I'm familiar with them because they've been made into movie or TV series. Not one of them have I read.
Well, if you like Watchmen as much as you like it, you really owe it to yourself to read at least Sandman, I would say.
All right, I'll put that on the list there. But yeah, it was really a lot of fun to revisit. And, I had thought I'll just power through this in a weekend. In the Saturday I picked it up and I read the first 2 issues and I'm like, I'm not doing this. I'm not powering through this. I'm ruining it.
It's so good.
Right. Yeah. So I would try to pace myself and just read 1 issue a day, so that I had time to really go back and look at it. And before I started, I hopped on the internet. It's like, what things should I look for while reading The Watchmen? And of course, all tens of millions of geeks out there all have their opinions on it. But certain things that they highlight about the structure of it and the way certain things are framed and whatnot. I was like, oh yeah, I'm going to appreciate that when I get to it.
The structure is incredible. The other thing that's incredible is Dave Gibbons' art, and I've never been, in comics. A lot of people are just like, they're fanboys for the artist. They love, God, I don't remember the guy's name anymore. The guy that created Spawn was really famous for his Spider-Man. Ted McFarlane, yeah. And I'm just like, I don't care. I literally don't care about comic book art. I care about characters and story, like I care with every other medium. But I think Dave Gibbons, his contribution to this is so essential in terms of the way the art reinforces the themes and the structure of the story. That it's, yeah.
Yeah, very much so. And I would catch myself reading this as if it was a novel, just blazing through the words and turning the pages, and I would stop and flip back and go back over the panels again to look for that.
Yeah.
What are they showing? And there's, I don't know, genius might be a strong word to throw at a graphic novel, but I'm going to throw it at it anyway.
Yeah, absolutely.
Some of it's just genius.
It is.
Some of the way, you've got these beautiful panoramic wide shots. You've got these panels that span the width of the page that are a single image, but they're divided into thirds or fourths, and in each one there's character movement while the background is static. It's beautiful. It's almost like a time lapse type of deal.
Yeah. It's incredible. One of the things I falsely remembered from this is that Gibbons uses a grid, a 3x3 grid, which is unusual. It's kind of dull. It's kind of plain for a comic book, just a 3x3 grid. And I was expecting to see that 3x3 grid on every page, but in fact, he breaks that 3x3 grid a lot. It's there. It's the underlying grid, and he composes around that grid. So when he does like a splash panel, it's usually, it's the top 3 they'll combine into one, or maybe the top 6 he'll combine into one, and so he'll have the 3 down below. Sometimes take the 3 into a 4 to get more movement or whatever. But that 3x3 grid is there throughout. It's just like a heartbeat through the whole book. Boom, boom, boom. 3, 3, 3, 3, 3. Yeah, and that's incredible also. And I think it's hard to know how much Gibbons influenced Moore and how much Moore influenced Gibbons. But there are visual themes that come up again and again and again in this book that work so effectively because of that grid. So,
yeah. Now this particular one that I bought, when you get into the last few pages, there's photographs of documents, letters and notes that went back and forth between the creators and the publishers, sketches, thumbnails. I don't know if any of that appeared. Each volume has got text pages in the back, but they clearly were meant to be there. It's part of the original publication. They supported the story and whatnot. But the stuff that's in the end of this one, I can't imagine made it into, the original comic book that went out.
No,
and
I don't think so.
That was so much fun to paw through. And it's a little bit annoying because it's in their native handwriting, and the imaging is sometimes of low quality. You really can't make it out. But to see the thought that went into this, the discussions that went into things like the frame structure and the how the pages were going to be laid out and how that was going to play over time through the combined work, and stuff that when you say comic book, you're not thinking about that. You're not thinking that there's an outline, that there's a plan, that there's a vision. And this clearly is nothing but plan and vision.
Yeah. Have you read, by the way, Scott McCloud's works on comics, Understanding Comics?
Can't say that I have. No.
Maybe we'll do that on the podcast sometime. That's an amazing book. He wrote a comic book about how comic books work as sequential art. He actually talks about, he sort of likes to get away from the term comic books, but he does use the term in the title. But, sequential art is a very specific thing. And it's different from a movie where the frames come at you, whether you want them or not. You can sort of take your time with each frame. But the fact that the story is divided up in 2 frames is significant. And he talks about all the ways you can do that and all the effects you can do and how effective it is. And it's a great book. It's a great book. And these guys, genius, I think, applies. They are masters of this. Yeah. All right. So So that's the meta. What about the story? You picked this, so you must love the story.
Well, I mean, okay, I've been away from my broken character trip for a while, and this is just a fantastic assemblage of broken characters.
Oh my God, they're all broken.
And in fact, Rorschach in his journal is complaining about this. He's going through the list of all of his former compatriots and what's wrong with them now, and then he ends up with a line that's something along the lines of, "Why are there so few of us left still functional and without personality disorders?"
Yes.
This is Rorschach.
Yes, I know, the irony, yeah.
It's fantastic. And we talked about, back when we did Who Goes Here, how surprisingly complex the plot came from what promised to be a very simple premise.
Yes.
And again, if you use that term comic book, right? This is a comic book. You don't expect to have all that depth, all that complexity to it. And it's deep, it's complex, it's haunting in a way.
It's really thematic for a comic book, and that the focus is not on, there is a very, very strong story, and there's rich, complex characters, but Moore and Gibbons developed these themes over the course of the book. And so they really spend a lot of time on stuff that's really kind of tangential to the story, but deeply, deeply important to the theme. Mm-hmm. Like all the time we spend on the comic within a comic, that
is just, I love it.
Yeah.
And of course they structured it so there are parallels between the comic within a comic and the storyline itself. And one of there's a lot to hate about the big screen attempt at bringing this. There's a lot to like about it, but one of the things that I really am unforgiving about is that they left that entire subplot out, which I'm sure they did for runtime.
I think they had to for legal reasons, actually.
Oh, yeah?
I think when they bought the rights, they did not get the rights to that story.
That's bizarre to think that the story within the story would be licensed separately.
It happens. I mean, like John Irving wrote that novel about the guy with the weird name, Gorp, Glop, Glurp, World According to Garp.
Okay.
World According to Garp. And the World According to Garp has a story inside the novel, something about the pension girl parser. And John Irving refused to release that story with the rights to the novel. So they had to come up with their own story in the movie, which was a very much lighter story about a guy who plays piano.
Right.
Yeah. But maybe it was runtime. I don't know. Maybe they would have fought harder for it.
I would think so, because it was not a short movie as it was. Although they could have taken 20 minutes of slow motion out of it and
easily
trimmed that up a little bit.
Zack Snyder, man, he's an amazing visual storyteller, but he is not a very good other storyteller. And he's kind of a slave to his source material. I mean, like he did when he did 300, he did it basically shot for shot with the comic book. And when he did this too, he tried to do shot for shot with the book in a lot of places. He did change the ending. I thought he changed the ending very effectively.
He did change the ending.
Yeah.
Which bothered me. I mean, I can see the why of it, but that doesn't change the fact that he didn't have to change the ending. He could have done the correct ending.
I'll just say, I do not want to see the giant vagina monster blown up on a big screen. That would just been horrific. That's nightmare fuel.
Okay. Not the objection I was expecting, but okay. The giant vagina monster. I don't guess that's an inaccurate description. It is a horrific looking squiddly thing.
Yeah.
There was a Watchmen series set afterwards.
There was on HBO Max.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I loved was the fact that Ozymandias was teleporting frozen baby squids to random spots in the atmosphere to rain down on people every so often, just to remind them that there was a giant squid monster threat still out there in the universe somewhere.
Gotcha.
That was actually a fun series in that they went back to the original premise there.
Interesting. I never watched it. I somehow got the impression, and I could be mistaken, that it was going to be a condemnation of right-wing politics. And I just thought, I'm just tired of that. So
I don't know that you're wrong in that.
Okay. Yeah.
I thought they did a pretty good job for flying beyond the edges, coloring outside the edges there. And they didn't do anything that I felt like broke what the original comic tried to set up.
Interesting. Maybe I'll check it out. I assume it's still on Max. But of course, it doesn't have Moore as a writer, and he's the big draw here. It doesn't have his blessing for sure because,
I wouldn't think so. I imagine that at best he'd watch it and go, well, they didn't screw anything up too badly.
Oh no, I don't think he's even that generous. He's like,
I did say it best. I'm sure it's not the story he would choose to tell.
I think he renounced everything to do with Watchmen. He won't talk about it. He won't interview about it. He won't contribute to it. He just claims his authorship of it, which they can still put his name on it anyway because it's a draw. He's so angry about how that property was treated at DC. Yeah, so.
That's unfortunate.
He's a very strange man. So,
indeed.
He gave us some great work, and then he gave us a bunch of really weird. Have you read any of his other stuff? Again, you're not a big comic book reader, but
I don't know that I have. I don't know that I haven't.
After his big departure from DC, he started his own comic company, which was, God, what was it called? Not Top Cow, Top 10, Number 10, something. And he was writing like 5 titles a month by himself. Just weird, wonderful stuff. Like one was sort of a Tom Swifty type thing, just absolute throwback retro science fiction, like something Heinlein could have written in one of his juveniles.
Okay.
And a couple of other titles which I don't remember now, and they were really fun. And then but clearly just a money grab. They were not the depth and complexity of this. He's banging out 5 titles a month by himself. Yeah.
That reminds me of Cavalier and Clay.
Yeah, yeah. And then he just went, so.
Yeah, that's all right.
All right, so here's a question for you. Favorite character?
I don't know how anyone can answer that other than to say Rorschach. So Rorschach.
I think you can have differing opinions because Rorschach is, horrible. He's horrible, but yeah, he's my favorite character too.
Yeah, and he's more or less the voice of the entire story.
He is.
Right? He's the narrator that carries us through, quite literally.
Yeah.
So we get to see more Rorschach than anything else, and what a lovely backstory. Oh my gosh.
Lovely. Well, okay, that's the word I'd use.
What a profoundly powerful backstory.
Yes.
You've got this kid who came from horrible backgrounds, and he was a hellion. He was like Wolverine in that he wouldn't take anything from anybody. He didn't let the fact that he was small or disadvantaged ever slow him down. And he grew up to kind of be a normal-ish guy.
Yeah.
He had his serious flaws, but when he first put on the mask and started, vigilanteing, is that a verb?
Sure.
He was not as profoundly broken and disturbed as he became.
Yeah.
Right? And then that kidnapping, that moment when he realizes what had happened to those little girls or that little girl, whatever was human in him died at that moment. Yeah. And he said, what is it? Kovacs walked in, Rorschach walked out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That moment, the interview with the psychiatrist is incredible, partly because we get that backstory. The other thing I love about that story, and it's told almost sort of at a glance from the side, is the relationship between the psychiatrist and his wife. Mm-hmm. And here's this guy, and she's telling him to his face, "You're a good man, and I'm worried that this is going to change you." And it does, and he confronts evil. He's forced to confront evil by Rorschach, and he just, he thinks he can. He thinks that evil doesn't exist in the world. He thinks he can reach and save this person, and he really, really can't. And it's just, it's incredible.
Yeah, and Rorschach is insightful.
Oh,
I mean, so when he's sitting there talking to the psychiatrist, he says, "You're not interested in me. You're not interested in helping people. You're interested in getting famous and published." And then later we see some of the psychiatrist's notes, afterwards the comic book, and he's like, "Yep, I need to keep an eye on this for publication. An eye towards publication on this case."
I think Rorschach's being a little cynical there because I think I don't remember the character's name, the psychiatrist. I think he is interested in helping Rorschach. And I think, yes, publication and yes, attendant fame, but also he's so broken that the ego trip is not, I'll be famous for helping him. The ego trip is, I'm the one that can help him. He's so broken, and I can be the one that makes a difference in his life.
I could buy that.
But he's wrong.
A difference is made in a life.
Yeah.
However.
Oh, no. Yeah.
So what about you? What's your favorite character?
Oh, Rorschach. Far and away. Of course. Of course. It's such a great assemblage of characters. They work really well together. And, you know, Dr. Manhattan is an amazing, fascinating character, but he's kind of inhuman by the time we meet him. So he's hard to latch onto. He's a big part of what makes the book compelling, though. And the comedian, is so important.
Yep.
Ozymandias, also fascinating, but you don't get to spend a lot of time with him either. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like if I had to pick a second, it would be between John and the comedian. You know, the Silk Spectre just wasn't that interesting to me. What was her mom?
Oh, yeah. She was the...
I can't think of the...
Don't know.
Oh, well, it doesn't matter because that's how important she was to me, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, and the Night Owls, actually the original Night Owl I thought was a more interesting character than Dryburgh as the second generation Night Owl. You know, and we don't spend, I don't know, maybe 20 panels with the original Night Owl, you know, but he's this old timer who's retired from superheroing, but, you know, still in good shape. And
it's interesting because, I mean, it's obviously a takedown, it's a deconstruction of superheroes, but there's only one legit superhero in this whole thing.
Yeah.
Maybe you could carve out for Ozymandias because he's so, I mean, he's insanely, inhumanly successful.
Yeah.
I mean, he's like Elon Musk times 10. Yeah. He's also a physical specimen, you know?
Yeah. I mean, he's the Batman of the story, right? In that he's pushing the limits of human endurance and ability, and he also has pockets so deep that he can finance this scheme of his.
He's interesting. I don't think he's the Batman of the story. I think Dryburgh is the Batman of the story.
Really?
He's the rich guy. Well, he's
definitely got the toys compared to.
He's the night. He's the creature of the night.
Right.
He's got the toys. He's got the ridiculous costume.
He doesn't catch bullets, though.
He doesn't catch bullets. But what Dryburgh is Alan Moore's commentary on Batman. I believe that, you know, and Moore wouldn't be alone in this. Moore thinks that Batman is a fascist, that he gets his kicks out of going around beating people up. That if he just wanted to help people, he's a fucking billionaire. He could help them directly. You know,
there are more effective ways to do that. Huh?
Yeah, than to spend his time out on the streets beating up petty criminals. And I think it's significant that Dryburgh can't get it up with his new girl until he goes out and beats up some criminals. I think that's deliberate. Yeah. So it literally makes him hard that he goes out and punches some petty any criminal in the face. Yeah.
The costumes made it good.
Yeah. So yeah, Adrian Veidt, Ozymandias, I think he's a whole other animal. I don't know what he is.
Yeah, and I have a problem with the name Ozymandias. People often will pop out, well, not often, it's not he comes up in daily conversation, but when Ozymandias pops up, they usually think this is a symbol of power, of greatness. And the poem is about a forgotten king of nothing. He's in the middle of a wasteland, you know? So, I mean, average Bob walking around the street that's heard the name and decides, hey, Ozymandias is a cool guy. I could see that. But this highly educated, highly trained, this man who followed Alexander's footsteps knows the poem. And why does he deliberately choose? He's planning to be the savior of the world, and he chooses this label, which is actually a label of failure, not a label of success.
Well, I mean, if we believe him, he's not in it for glory. He's in it for selfless, you know.
He's in it to save the world.
Yeah. Although the last thing he does before he ends, you know, before he brings this incredible, devastating consequences to New York City is he trades on the information. Yeah, he's in it to save the world, but he's in it to save the world in his own image, for sure. So, yeah, I don't know. Why is he Ozymandias? That's a good question.
Yeah, I don't know. It's one of those, I feel like it's one of those names that most people use without properly understanding. And yet he, maybe I don't properly understand it. Maybe
be.
the writers understand it better than I do. But my read on that poem is, and I don't see how you go otherwise on that, right? It's a head and a pedestal in the middle of a desert.
Yeah.
This is what's left of his works.
I only know the one line, which is, "Look on my works, ye mighty, and despair."
You see, it's a really good line.
It's a great line.
It's a really good line.
And you could read it two different ways. You could be like, "Oh, you'll never be as great as me. Look at all I've accomplished." Or you could read it as, "Look at all I've accomplished, but now this is all that's left."
So you're not familiar with the poem?
I'm not familiar with the poem. Yeah.
So it's a short poem. A traveler lost in the desert stumbles across the remains of a statue. And what's left is the head and the base, the pedestal of the statue.
Yeah.
Carved on the statue's pedestal is this: "Look on my works, ye mighty, and despair," Ozymandias.
Yeah.
And we get a really good description of the head, which seems like he's a snotty bastard. And it's in the middle of a desert.
Yeah.
There are no works upon which to look. This man who proclaimed himself King of Kings, there's nothing left other than a broken statue of the guy.
But there is a broken statue left hundreds of years later. It's
"Look
like,
on my works, ye mighty, and despair." This broken statue.
It's like Jack Sparrow. It's like, you're the worst pirate I've ever heard of.
But you have heard of me.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, he does. I remember he talks about it, and I didn't bookmark this. I didn't take any notes on this. But he does a whole monologue about why he picked the name.
Yeah, and it's a serious nit to pick. I would need to sit down and talk to Alan and see what he had in mind there. But there's so much symmetry going through this thing. Now there's an entire issue that is symmetrical. You split it at the middle and you work out from page to page, and they're all reflections of each other.
Oh, interesting. I didn't notice that.
From page one to page last, as you work your way, they meet in the middle. Everything is exactly mirror images, which is kind of beautiful.
Which issue is that?
Issue 5, Fearful Symmetry.
Fearful Symmetry. Okay, there we go.
If you start in the middle of it and you page back and forth, every matching sets of pages are mirror reflections of each other, from first page to last page, and again, they meet together in the middle.
Interesting.
Now, again, like you said, most of these are based on his 3x3, so it's not obvious if you don't look for it, but it's there. But the whole story itself, I mean, our opening image, we have the smiley face with the blood stain on it.
I love that. I love how that comes back again and again.
The closing image, we have the kid in the New Frontiersman wearing a smiley face T-shirt, and he's eating, and he's dripped sauce.
The ketchup, yeah.
So it's exactly the same image as he's picking up Rorschach's journal to run it in the newspaper.
We also get in the last issue his dome. His garden dome, his atrium, has just a little bit of snow cleared from the dome, and it's in the same shape of that ketchup splat.
I missed that one.
Ah, okay. Yeah.
And now I'm starting. I've got sticky notes packed all through this, just stuff that grabbed my eye. But since we're talking about the end here, Ozymandias is asking John whether or not he was successful, whether he saved everything, and John doesn't answer. He disappears in a piece of smoke. But the way it's drawn, we're looking at him partially through a glass ball, and the ball distorts the smoke into the shape of a mushroom cloud.
All right, so here's a question. So at the end, Ozymandias, on his own authority, has decided to rain hellfire on New York City, destroying the lives of, and this is a really great thing that Moore and Gibbons do, is that we get to meet all these people who are going to be blown up in this explosion. And because they're all at the newsstand. We get the news vendor and the kid that reads comic books and the lesbian couple and the psychiatrist and his wife. They're all sort of around, and Rorschach comes to this place also, but he's not there. They're all the ones that are going to die. So we get to spend quite a bit of time with them and just sort of in passing. And then we see them all devastated. So Veidt does this. He takes this on himself to kill all of these people in sacrifice for the greater good. And Rorschach goes, no, that's evil. And I won't stay silent about it.
Yep, I will not compromise, not even in the face of Armageddon.
Yes. All right, so this is not a fair question, but who's right?
Oh, Lord. Yes.
Yeah, no.
Yes. They are both right. This is a Obi-Wan Kenobi. It depends on a certain point of view, right? I don't know. We don't know for a fact that the world was going to blow itself up, that the superpowers wouldn't have pulled back. And we don't know. In fact, we're given very strong reason to doubt that this new peace that Ozymandias has wrought is going to be long-term. Yes, he reset. And, this is one of the things, that last triumphant drawing of him saying, I did it. And he's standing there with his arms above his head. And the way it's framed, he's standing in front of a yellow circle. If he were the hands of a clock, his arms over his head are hands of a clock. And he's reset the clock by about 4 minutes. He's pushed it from 1 minute to midnight back to 5 minutes to midnight.
So let's take his action as a given. I'm not going to defend the morality of that. I think that's wildly immoral. But given that it's happened, is Rorschach right to refute that and try to bring that to the attention of the public? Or is that just, no, for the greater good, you need to shut the hell up because this is done and we just got to cling to this chance of peace no matter what the compromise in our morals?
Well, I don't think you can play it as if Rorschach can choose. Again, he's had a core of humanity burned out of him. What's left functions on a very simple code. And that code says wrong is wrong. And clearly what has happened is wrong. So it's kind of like asking, is it immoral that the tide came in? Of course he's going to move forward and try to wreak revenge on this, or to at least let people know that it happened.
Rorschach's choice is not the moral question. The moral question is Rorschach announces his intentions. Is stopping Rorschach the moral choice, which is what John does, and which everyone else is like, are we just going to let him go? We can't just let him go.
Yeah, and John just pops out and kills him.
Yeah.
Well, in this, John and Ozymandias have something in common, in that they see a course of action and they follow it. Yeah. Neither one of them dithers. Well, John dithers just a little bit.
He's a ditherer. Yeah.
But the further we get into the story, like you said, the more removed he becomes from humanity. That's interesting. Actually, both he and Rorschach are kind of removed from humanity. So the fact that it's the two of them at the end, I hadn't thought about that one before.
Yeah.
But I mean, is it the right thing to do? I don't know what the answer to that is. If I were John, would I have zapped him? I don't know. I'm not a superhuman who's removed from the flow of time.
So the reason this is an interesting question to me is because occasionally the press in this country will stumble on a story which is just devastating to the United States. Abu Ghraib was one such story. So there we we're fighting in Iraq, which a lot of people disagreed with to begin with. But then when Abu Ghraib came out, it's just like, it just blew any of our credibility to the moral high ground away. Yeah. And it's like, well, do the reporters have an obligation here to just like, oh my God, this is going to be devastating for us, to sort of sit on that information until the war is over? If they feel like they did, they certainly didn't. Or do they have an obligation to get it out to hopefully stop the war, which I don't think was going to work either? Or do they just say our allegiance is to the truth, whatever that is, and that's a higher principle? So, yeah, and this all happened well after this book came out.
I mean, the famous story that the D-Day, the president actually shared the plans for the invasion of Europe, the invasion of France, with the press corps and asked them not to publish it because publishing it would be, the Germans would get word and it would just screw everything up. And the press corps did as he asked. They restrained that information until after the event itself, which was probably why we had such fantastic headlines ready to go.
Yeah.
I don't know. This is why philosophy exists and ethics exist in classrooms too. How do you answer these, right? I would tend to lean towards the greatest good for the greatest number, but you can really quickly start justifying some atrocities without reasoning.
Yeah,
such as dropping a mega vagina monster in the middle of New York City to kill millions and disturb psychics worldwide.
Organ donation. We could chop you up and save 8 lives, Yeah. Why is your life more important than 8 other people's?
Monty Python did a lovely skit on that.
Oh, they did, yes. And we've come for your liver. I said, well, I'm still using it.
What's this? It's an organ donor card. Organ donor card.
That was such a weird, disturbing movie. That was The Meaning of Life.
Yes.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Meaning
Wasn't
of Life? Meaning of Life.
Meaning of Life. Yeah,
Yep.
yeah. Very unsettling. Very dark for Python.
My least favorite Python film. Life of Brian is my favorite. And then, of course, Holy Grail. And then Meaning of Life.
I think it's the least coherent we're getting way off topic now. It's the least coherent as a film because it sort of organizes a series of sketches.
Yeah.
And I think the individual sketches rise to heights that are much higher than anything that's in Holy Grail or Life of Brian, but it doesn't hang together in a satisfying way. There's not a narrative. Yeah, it's just it's a series of impressions.
Does have the greatest song ever committed to film, though.
Every Sperm is Sacred?
Every Sperm is Sacred. All right, Watchmen.
All right.
Wow, did I love revisiting this. And it was totally worth buying a new copy.
It's so good. It's so good.
And now I'm going to have to see if I can get in touch with Mary and get my original back. Because that's the one that Rob gave me all those years ago. I mean, I packed that thing to Hawaii. Yeah. It was one of the precious things I couldn't leave behind. Thanks, Rob. I really appreciate you turning me onto this, by the way. I hope you're listening.
Thanks. Man, who gave me these? Was it... oh, you know what? I think it was Gabe Newell, who runs Valve now.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. He was worked in my building and just like dumped a bunch of this stuff. Yeah. I read this book. I remember getting this book and sitting in my office. It's like everyone had already gone home. It was like 11 o'clock at night. And I'm just going to I'll just take a look at this. And sat there for the next 5 hours and finished it. Listening to the soundtrack to Rain Man over and over again, the 2 Hans Zimmer tracks on Rain Man, just on repeat. And just like, oh my God, this is incredible. This is amazing. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I may actually read it again before I set it up on the shelf. I just really enjoyed going through that.
The problem with Watchmen is that you get into it's like, oh my God, comic books have evolved. They're so much better now than what I remember as a kid. I'm going to start reading comic books again. There's nothing else like this out there. Nothing is remotely as good as this. You just go, oh, I'm going to, okay, sort of get a little bit of fix from, Dark Knight Year One or Ronin or whatever. And nothing keeps up with Watchmen. Nothing compares. So
no, again, I think this is one of 2 graphic novels that I've ever read. The other being Mouse. I guess 3 because Mouse. There's actually 2
volumes. Yeah, Mouse is very, very good.
In a very, very different way, of course.
Yes,
clearly.
yeah.
So, there's that list. Whenever you start talking about graphic novels, there are things that keep coming up, names that keep coming up, and I feel like I should go investigate at least those, and maybe I will at some point. But anyway, for now, I'm just feeling good about having revisited this one. It's probably been 10 years since I picked this thing up, other than to loan it to my friend.
Yeah. So speaking of Rorschach, Rorschach teams up with Night Owl for a bit. Mm-hmm. Yeah, which again I think is another way of Alan Moore poking the Batman as fascist thing, because Rorschach is not someone you want to team up with. Right?
I love one of the sticky notes I've got here is Rorschach walks into a bar and the bartender's Happy Harry. Yeah. And he's like, Rorschach,
please don't kill anyone.
Please don't kill anyone. After trying to, that's what comes out of his mouth. Oh God, please don't kill anyone. And he just grabs a random kid who's sitting there and starts breaking his fingers while asking questions of the entire bar.
Which is amazing, because Rorschach is the one that says to Veidt at the end, never compromise. You can't just kill a bunch of people for your plan to save the world. That's exactly his MO, is to just start hurting random people.
No, he hurts people. He doesn't kill people. It's fundamentally different.
No,
you're right. You're right. This is a pot calling the kettle black type of situation.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I felt like one of us was going somewhere.
I was talking about the team up between Rorschach and Night Owl.
Well, go on.
Yeah, so Night Owl, I mean, what are you doing, man? You're a normal human being, and you're hanging out with Rorschach. You're teaming up with a literal psychopath.
But no, I mean, you're talking about in the early days, right?
Yes, yeah.
That was Dryburgh teaming up with Kovacs. That was not Rorschach.
Okay.
Right. So when Kovacs became Rorschach, it wasn't long after that before Dryburgh separated from him.
Yeah.
And not much after that before the masked vigilantes were put out of business wholesale.
And then this is actually a sticking point for me as I read this again. Rorschach gets arrested, he's thrown in prison, and Dryberg and what's-her-face decide to break him out of prison.
Yep.
They're going to commit a massive, massive felony to release a convicted felon from prison. And, they're not going to do it in a way where they just teleport him out. They're going to cause a prison riot and it's going to be insane. And it's like, yeah, but I feel like he has maybe some information we need about this other. It's like,
well, the riot was not part of the plan.
The riot was going to happen anyway, but they didn't know that.
They didn't know that. I love, there's a moment in there after Rorschach has flung a vat of hot cooking fat onto a felon.
Greatest line in the whole book.
You don't get it. You don't understand. I'm not locked up in here with you. You're locked up in here with me. Yeah. Absolutely, dude.
Ah, so good.
Nothing but respect, mad respect, Roar, man. You need anything, I'm over there. Leave me alone.
The bit where he's in his cell and Big Figure is using the riot as cover to kill Rorschach. Uh-huh. And Rorschach just, ends up killing all his cronies along the way while mocking his height. So the guy's there and he grabs the guy and ties him up, and then it's like, oh, we got to cut through you now, Tony, because you're in the way of me and vengeance. It's like, what? No. Yeah.
Well, and that's a great moment. Rorschach's in his cage and the big thug is reaching through. He's like, what have you got? What are you going to do? Or what is it? What have you got? And then Rorschach grabs his pinky fingers. He's said, your hands, my perspective.
Yeah. He's the confidence of this guy. It's
no
amazing.
doubt. And he's, they describe him as a runt over and over again. And there's a moment in there when they tackle him and they discover he's wearing platform shoes. What does platform shoes give a person? An inch, maybe?
Yeah.
He's got to run and fight in these things. It's not like he's on, 5-inch heels or anything like that. So he can't have been that physically small. But just the mask and the stinky trench coat, apparently he doesn't smell good.
Yeah.
And the hat, he's intimidation bundled up, even if he's lacking the physical frame for it.
He has a ferocity that comes from a singleness of purpose. He is not inflicted with doubt like Dryberg is, or the comedian even is, or John is. Everyone else is plagued with doubt except for Rorschach and Ozymandias. Yeah, those are the only two people that can just act with total confidence.
I think the comedian had that, but he loses it when he realizes what the big joke is.
Yes.
And, he loses it to the point he breaks into an arch villain, a former enemy's apartment and
Moloch.
Sobs. Yeah, he breaks into Moloch's apartment and sobs, and he says some incoherent things, which puts Rorschach on a track.
Yeah. I don't think he does have the same level of confidence. I think what he has is he's found a way to not care, which is different. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so he'll act as if he has total confidence because it's not that he's driven by purpose, he's driven by apathy, and a paycheck. It's like, you tell me to go here, I'll kill whoever you want, I don't care, ha ha ha. Yeah, that's why he's the comedian. That gives him that emotional distance from what he's doing until he can't deal with it. Yeah, and he has a conversation with Moloch, and he sees the island, and it's just like, oh my God, yeah, so...
But so back to your original question, what's the moral duty there? It never occurs to him to go public with this knowledge. He sees what's happening. He knows what's going to happen, or at least some flavor of what's going to happen. And he knows he can't tell anyone about it.
Yeah.
Because stopping it would be worse.
That's interesting.
So he had an answer to your question that I didn't have.
Did he not tell because stopping would be worse, or did he not tell because he was just so gutted by it that he couldn't cope? I don't know. I would have to think about that.
All right.
Because that's sort of more in keeping with his character, as I understand it. That before he can laugh at the world and not care, and then he cares so much that he's undone by this knowledge that he can no longer laugh at it. Yeah. But it doesn't give him the ability to act. In fact, it takes away his ability to act. If what gave him the ability to act before was his emotional distance and laughing at the joke. Yeah.
So you think it's some sort of emotional paralysis as opposed to
as opposed to a moral choice. Yeah. He was not a deeply moral person.
I think he was deeply amoral.
I think he was deeply immoral. He's okay. So content warning: sexual assault. He rapes one of the other characters in the book. Yeah, but only once, as he says, to that character's daughter.
And now that's a confusing storyline because we're led to believe that there was an assault, right? But then we're led later to believe that there was a continuing relationship after that.
Yes.
And whether or not that was whether there was actually a rape or whether the assault they're talking about was what happened after the Minutemen meeting that Hooded Justice interrupted.
Yeah.
I was a little bit unclear on that too, because
that's my understanding.
For a little while, Jane, I think is her name, strongly implies that there was rape. But then later in the book, as she's looking back on it, that language changes, that story changes.
She says to her daughter, the Silk Spectre, I don't remember what any of the names are now. The Silk Spectre says to her daughter,
I think it might be Laura or Laurie.
Laurie, yeah. That, with the passage of time, sort of these memories soften and you remember the good parts.
Right.
So I think there was a rape, and I don't know if it went to completion because it was interrupted by Hooded Justice. And we get reinforcement of that idea in that Hooded Justice writes about all this stuff, and then he gives a copy to the daughter, and she goes, "No, don't read that book." And he's like, "Oh, I wasn't thinking." Of course, because that story is in there.
Right.
Yeah. But then later, she has a relationship with the comedian that is completely consensual.
Right.
And he's her father.
He's her father.
Yeah.
But if it's the Hooded Justice thing, he interrupts before there can actually be sex involved.
Yes, I think so. So it's just a sexual assault.
You're right. Just.
Yes.
There are strong air quotes around that.
Yes, yeah.
So again, that, and maybe it's good that it's a little bit confusing, right? Because, but the upshot is the same, right? He is a parent, and he's one of two people that knows this.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, three. I assume John knows.
Well.
Yeah.
Now that's weird because John has a strange relationship with time and knowledge, and he talks about things that haven't happened. So he's got foreknowledge, but when the things happen, he reacts as if he's lacking the foreknowledge, right? He's locked into a script of behaving the way he knows he's going to have behaved.
Yes.
This is like Douglas Adams' time travel tenses here.
Yeah.
So I mean, I find that kind of fascinating.
We're gonna visit that again in 2 weeks.
Soon.
Yeah.
Very soon. Yes.
I love that. I love that where he's talking to her about the fact that, in 6 minutes, you're going to tell me that you're sleeping with Dryberg. And she's like, oh, yeah, well, okay, yes, I am sleeping with Dryberg. It's like, oh, you're sleeping with Dryberg.
Yeah,
oh, the pain in my heart. It's like, but you knew.
At that moment, and he's like, once you weren't part of my life, I left Earth. Doesn't that say anything? But he knew that this was going to happen, right? It was always going to happen. It could never not happen.
Yes.
And yet, in the moment, he's actually in the moment. It's bizarre.
It is bizarre. I have a real problem with it as a science fictional thing. I mean, and a lot of physicists subscribe to this, that there is no time. There's a block universe, that everything that has happened has always happened. Everything that will happen has also always happened. And what we are as people who think we're existing with free will and making choices is we're just a consciousness traveling along a roller coaster track. Yeah. I don't subscribe to that theory at all. So,
Yeah.
And I think, it's a dangerous theory to subscribe to. I think if you actually believe that, it's going to fuck you up. It's an info hazard. Solipsism, block universe, avoid these thought patterns. They are bad for you. Yeah.
But they haven't always been and won't always be, or they have always been and will always be.
Yeah. I mean, it may even be true, but whether it's true or not, you have to believe that it's not true for your own sanity.
We'll talk about this more in 2 weeks.
All right. So speaking of favorite lines, my favorite line is Rorschach's line about you're locked up in here with me. But my second favorite line, I think, is John's line where he's talking about leaving. He's like, I'm not going to stick around. I realize I've become very interested in life. I think I'll go create some.
Yes. And it's interesting to question, how God is he?
Yeah.
And that's a fun thing, right? God exists and he's American, and it gets changed in the press release that the Superman exists and he's American. I mean, he seems confident he can do it.
Anything that lives is simply an assemblage of molecules, and we know he's got absolute mastery of putting molecules together in whatever combination he wants. And we know that he can look into the future, so he wouldn't even have to waste a lot of time with experimentation. He could just know.
And yet,
this will...
He's actually creating engines, machines, devices to try and observe a gluon.
Yeah.
Where does this omnipotence?
That's a good point. That's a good point.
To the point that it kind of ruins a romantic encounter with Laurie with the L girl.
I don't know.
So I mean, he's
so gluons are a lot smaller. I mean, maybe he's total command of atomic phenomena, and gluons are quite a bit smaller than atoms.
He talks about observing events that were so fast they can hardly be said to have happened, and yet he's building cogs and gears and machines to observe.
We can do that now. We can observe stuff at the attosecond level, and an attosecond is to a second what a second is to a billion years, and that's just. We can do that? That's incredible.
Without being superhuman.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Giant glaring... something you talk about problems with the book.
Okay.
John Osterman?
I think so.
Something very close to that. Walks into this experimental chamber that removes the intrinsic field. 3 weeks later, we have a Superman.
Yeah.
Are you honestly going to tell me that no one else tried that? That tens of thousands of people didn't line up to try that the government didn't build intrinsic field generator bases in secret throughout the country
and start blowing up volunteers?
Yeah. And then later, before he leaves Earth for Mars, he goes back to visit this place. Now we're talking about a couple of decades have passed, and it's in absolute ruins, complete disarray, the sort of thing that a century might wreak. It's like, not only was this so successful that it created God, everybody just left and let it fall to ruin. Nobody tried it again. Nobody threw a dog in there to see what would happen. I am not buying that this did not become America's Secret Project #1.
That's a good point. I took it as, I just took it as a comic book trope, that's, every single comic book hero's origin story is a one-off. We get the super soldier serum for Captain America, and then we never use it again, except for maybe it comes in for villains every now and again. But basically, we don't get to just crank out an army of these people because it can only be one Captain America. So something happened. We get the gamma ray exposure. I think this direct parallel is the Hulk. Yeah, Bruce Banner, who gets exposed to gamma radiation and becomes the Hulk. And we don't do that again. Yeah. So
the super serum for Captain America, there's reasons that can't be immediately duplicated, and there are attempts to duplicate it, right? We get Red Skull and whatnot. The Hulk, again, that was a freak thing. This is a device that they have constructed, that they have precision control of. They could grab another guy, another cinder block, another pocket watch, throw them in there, turn it on. And it may well be that it is unique because his knowledge, he was trained as a watchmaker.
Yeah.
Right?
And a physicist.
He's
a very, very smart person.
There's got to be more than one watchmaking physicist in the world. You've got the chamber. You do a recruitment drive. I'm just not buying that it's shut down with him.
Well, here's a question. Suppose you're the United States government. How many gods do you want? You've got one, and he's relatively tame.
Thank you. That
one?
gives me something I can swallow as a reason that this was not only discontinued, but abandoned. Because that entire facility was abandoned and left to decay.
Yeah.
Yes. All right. Thank you.
Yeah. What if your next one is, Rorschach? Yeah. Imagine Rorschach with godlike powers. Or just some average Joe, or just someone who's discontent with the government. Lee Harvey Oswald, gets in there.
Yeah, I suppose if you had two of them on the planet, then it might not be big enough. And there might be... Hijinks might ensue, right?
Hijinks would definitely ensue. I think a better argument is how come the Russians aren't building intrinsic field generators? Yeah.
Yep.
Because they've got to have access to this technology. You know, you can't keep that kind of thing secret. Are they just that technologically far behind?
Well, John was there, so he would know if they were up to it.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, that's the other argument. Once you have a god, he goes, do I want another god? Maybe not. Yeah, it's like your intrinsic field generators no longer work. I've taken care of that for you.
I have modified the laws of physics ever so slightly.
Yeah.
I did love the fact that Ozymandias' big plan was to deconstruct John again. You know, and 30 seconds later, there's John going, you know, this is the first trick I learned, right?
Yeah. Yeah. But he does manage to deploy tachyons to keep him off balance.
Which, you know, I was on the fence about whether or not tachyons existed, but hey, now we know, right? They can be generated, and without John's help. You know, Ozymandias did that on his own.
Which is impressive. He is, in a lot of ways, so much more impressive than John. John is incredibly powerful, but not particularly thoughtful. And he just kind of like does his stuff and farts around and has very little consequence other than as a big weapon. And Ozymandias is shaping the entire future history of humanity. He is mission driven and very capable. Yeah.
I love, and again, just a little detail, but he knows once John is there, he knows teleportation is possible because John teleports.
Yeah.
He figures out how to teleport things.
Yeah.
Can't make it work because it works because John is sentient and aware and can
I love that detail.
Modify his target destination so he's not coexisting with the existing matter there.
Yeah.
So if you try it without John, things just blow up, you know. But then he's as he's telling his plan to Dryberg and Rorschach, he's like, I was going to teleport the giant squid into New York. And Rorschach says, you said teleportation didn't work. He says, it works fine if you want things to blow up.
Yeah, which he does. Yeah. Yeah, so good. I can't fault it for I don't know. It's a very interesting point, but I can't fault it for that. Here's a fault that I have. And this is a really minor nitpick. Sometimes I think more is too clever. Sometimes I think the transitions between panels where it's like you know what a match shot is in film? Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah. It's like every panel transition is a match shot sometimes. It's going from this image to that image, and it's like, oh, look at that thematic connection. Look at how those two pieces of dialogue interweave so perfectly. And it's very, very clever, and it calls so much attention to itself. Mm-hmm. And I'm just like, be less clever for a minute.
It seems to me there's one issue in there that they really hit that a lot.
Yeah.
Where we're moving back and forth between two or three concurrent happenings. And you're right. It is a little bit distracting.
I think I say that now, though, having read this book many, many times, and not being dismayed by that at all the first time, just being like, oh my God, he's brilliant. And you know, he's such a talent. They're both so talented. You know, I mean, resisting the temptation to flex like that, if you can, must be difficult. But yeah, it's a little too much sometimes for me.
Well, if you haven't read this, what are you waiting for? Why haven't you bought it yet?
Why haven't you? Yeah.
Tony actually did something. He read it on the Kindle.
I did. Yeah. I have actually at least 2, maybe 3 copies of this in print, but they're packed up for my renovation. I actually went out and bought all the individual issues at some point after I bought the trade paperback. Mm-hmm. Because I thought, someday they'll be worth something, not realizing they were reprints, and they will never be worth anything.
Never be worth anything. And there are millions of them.
There are millions of them. I got they released posters of the covers, like about this size, and I bought those too. I was just obsessed with this book. But yeah, this time I read it on the Kindle, and it's a pretty decent experience, actually.
I considered it, but no, I wanted a physical for this particular thing.
Yeah. And when I say Kindle, you can read this on like a Kindle Paperwhite. That's not what I did. That would be insane. No, I read it on an iPad with the Kindle app.
So at least there was color.
Yes.
Yeah, at least there was.
All right. Anything else? Anything?
I was going to say, have we more to say? We've said a lot. Obviously, we both are invested in this one.
So good.
All right. I think I'm good for now. I think I've talked about Watchmen enough for the moment.
All right.
All right. So what's up next?
So next we have another book that deals with time travel in a way, and the horrors of war and moral choices, which is Slaughterhouse-Five by Kurt Vonnegut.
Woohoo! Looking forward to seeing that one again.
Me too.
All right, we'll see you in 2 weeks.
See you in 2 weeks.